Hans, a question for you after something you said. You said that an Iranian nuclear program could have a domino effect in their region. What countries have the money, resources, technology, or scientific expertise to begin to develop a nuclear program?
Well, Egypt is evidently the country that's the greatest nuclear potential. Saudi Arabia is the country that has most money. And sometimes it's speculated that Saudis might purchase nuclear capability from Pakistan that has it. The others are not so well advanced. Syria has some research capability, but it's not very well advanced. And the others are not significant at the present time. But if the pressure goes on, then they move. And what we see is that many countries in the region are going for nuclear energy. And that will acquire a capability in basic sciences. Now, going from that over to enrichment is a very strong step. So it doesn't mean that they are aiming at it. But I think one has to, in the commission that I headed on weapons of mass destruction, we discussed proliferation generally. And there were many different reasons, rationales, why countries move to nuclear weapons. They can be domestic, but there are two that always stand out, and one is security, perceived security, not necessarily actual security, but perceived security. And the other is status, to be taken seriously, to be talked to. For enrichment, of course, also the motivation of having an assured supply of enriched uranium for fuel is an important one. And Iran has some unfortunate experiences of that when they had difficulties in getting supply of fuel precisely for the research reactor, which they are now discussing new supply of. I think that when I look at Iran, and when we looked at it in our commission, we looked first at the security concerns. Is there some ways in which you can meet what you think moves them? And security would be one. Iran started the program, as far as we know, sometime in the 80s, at the time when we knew that Iraq was moving in that direction, and when Israel bombed the Iraq reactor, and Iran had a terrible war with Iraq. So what would be more natural than that they then felt that, yes, we have to move in this direction without taking a decision. Now, that has fallen away. Iraq is no longer a threat to them. And as I said, I don't see any other country in the neighborhood, Afghanistan or Turkey or any other, being a worry. US, yes, with some aircraft carriers in the Gulf is a threat, and Israel too, but only if they move on enrichment. So I think assurance on the security side is an important factor in getting a rational thinking. It may be that there is no rational thinking, but at any rate, I think we have to assume that. Status, I think, is also very important. We haven't had diplomatic relations with Iran since 1979, and they've been ostracized. And I think that generally in the West, one tends to underestimate the importance of the pride, of people's pride. And I think that humiliation is a very serious thing. I do not believe that it's a great thing to say that they are a member axis of evil. It may be good domestic politics. Yes, I agree. But I don't think it's very good in order to move the other side. So I would still opt for looking at the rationales that could satisfy what they perceive as reasons for going forward. Yeah, I got to stop that.
Jim, you wanted to add something?
I would just suggest to Hans the next time he's with Natan Sharansky that he ask him what happened in the Gulag when Reagan said evil empire. I think you'll find that it buoyed the morale of virtually everyone who was in prison and in the Gulag in the Soviet Union. These things matter.
Jim,
I haven't said that we should refrain from criticism. I'm exactly on your point there. I think that one can have negotiations, avoiding humiliation, at the same time voice criticism. And I think that's being done.
Thank you. Jim, a question for you that's reflected in several of these cards. Are you concerned about Israel's weapons of mass destruction program as well as Iran's? And secondly, what are the odds of an Israeli military attack against Iran in the next couple of years?
I think the odds of a Israeli military attack on Iran, not one using nuclear weapons, but just an attack, are going to be substantially affected by whether we are willing and able to bring pressure on the government of Iran to substantially change its behavior, and even within its current Islamic Republic, end up with some of the people who really won the election but had it stolen from them in power. If Israel sees a Islamic republic, but one headed by rational people, I think the chances of their feeling an existential risk lessen. But with Ahmadinejad and Khamenei and their cult of the Hojatiyya and all of that, no. There's probably a very substantial majority of the Iranian ruling elite who are very cynical about their ideology, somewhat the way the Soviets became after the mid-1950s. By the late 1950s, there were more true-believing Marxist-Leninists in the bookstores of the Upper West Side of Manhattan than there were in the Kremlin. And the same may be true of a fair chunk of the Iranian leadership. They don't want to die. They want to keep their nice country homes. But there is at least an important subset that are, to put it in my delicate fashion, theocratic, totalitarian, genocidal maniacs. And should some of those, perhaps including Khamenei and Ahmadinejad, decide that it is their role in life to hasten the return of the Mahdi by getting a lot of people killed, one cannot completely discount that possibility, and one certainly cannot completely discount that possibility if one is an Israeli decision maker.
Karim wants to add to that.
I would just add that I think for me what the last 4 months has really proven is that this regime is incredibly odious, but it ruthlessly wants to stay in power. It's odious, but it's not suicidal. And my concern is that, the conclusion I've reached is that the underlying problem we have with Iran has far more to do with the character of the regime than its nuclear ambitions. And a military strike on Iran, whether it's an Israeli or US military strike, would heal the enormous political rifts which exist at the moment, and it would kill the opposition. It would either pour cold water on the momentum of the opposition or dramatically alter its trajectory. So I always say to Israeli officials that if the problem is the character of the regime, by bombing Iran, we're only going to prolong and further entrench the worst elements of this regime for many years to come.
Thank you. One for Bob Einhorn. Can you explain what you meant when you said there is strong evidence Iran has done work on a missile warhead for delivering nuclear weapons?
Well, a number of governments, including the U.S. government, have provided to the IAEA pretty substantial information. Some of it acquired on a laptop computer regarding work done in the past on a design for what all experts seem to agree is a nuclear warhead. And that information has been passed to the IAEA. The IAEA has been doing its analysis, and we would encourage the IAEA to come to some conclusions about that analysis and make the analysis public. But there are many governments who are aware of that information and would like to see that information made public.
And when you say in the past, are you talking before 2003 or are you talking something more recently?
No, it would be before 2003. That's not to say categorically that there's no such activity has taken place since then, but what I've been talking about, the design of this warhead, took place prior to 2003.